Hey, good afternoon or evening, everybody. I'm Pat Murray. I publish the Durham Skywriter, that's Durham, North Carolina's online community paper. And I have this show that I'm doing right now, TV Skywriter, where I talk to people from everywhere about interesting things, interesting people. We talk about interesting things. So today we're going to talk about music. We're going to talk about visual arts and global adventures with Mr. Douglas R Ewart, an old friend of mine. I met him when I was, if you know me, you know that I'm from Chicago. I met Douglas and Janice in Chicago when I was living there. So let's bring him on. We're going to talk about all kinds of great things, including the fact that next Sunday he will be appearing with Mr. Let me get the names right, 𝗦𝗪𝗂𝗪𝗪𝗂𝗧 and Robert Dick in a very special presentation, Sonic Paradise Flute Flight. That's going to be in Chicago next Sunday. So let's bring on Mr. Douglas R Ewart. Hey, it's time for TV Skywriter. Douglas, what's new?
Hey, what a pleasure to see you. What a pleasure to continue the connection, the relationship. I pride myself on longevity of connection with people. I think it's really important to try to maintain friendships that have real depth to them, and time helps to make that and to solidify the connection. And
absolutely,
even though I always call her Patricia, although I think she prefers Pat. But
okay, I answer to Pat, Patricia, Miss Murray, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, in any event, even though we've both moved from Chicago, we've kept in touch, and it's gratifying to be on her program. And and some of you might not know, Patricia is also a musician, and many years ago, she plays the guitar, and she's of course quite modest.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And actually, some people are probably saying, "Where have I seen him before?" Well, you have seen Douglas Ewart probably if you're into jazz, AACM. Also, speaking of the visual arts, it says here you're a professor emeritus of the Art Institute, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. How about that?
Yes. I taught there for over 25 years. I actually worked in the sound department for a short, probably a couple of years, and then in the humanities department, teaching music history, both of Latin America and the Caribbean and the Asia Pacific, and a contemporary music seminar.
Okay. So, now, you are not the only visually artistic musical artist, because Miles Davis did both. Tony Bennett does both. There's quite a few musicians who do visual art. And I'm wondering, is that because there's something extra you need to express and you just can't get it out with music? Or is it for a different reason?
I think they're intrinsically connected. You're dealing with space, you're dealing with time, you're dealing with color. We have tone color as we have color in terms of pigment color or paint color. You're dealing with chromaticism, which we can also find in music. There are lots of common aspects to both. I see the connection as inextricable. I began actually making things before I began playing. Growing up in Jamaica, we made a lot of the items that we utilized, and that grew from making tops, kites, which also you talk about aerodynamics. We used to make colorful kites.
We used to make
Sometimes,
kites out of paper bags with our dad every spring.
see, paper bags. We used newspaper. We used the ribs of the leaves of palm trees.
Oh,
We use bamboo to make the frames.
okay.
So there's that connection in terms of the visual component, because we would make these kites and then we would get what's called pretty paper. It was a very thin paper, almost it's thin like the paper that you use to wrap up a gift
Wow.
in. And so you had to be very skilled to put that on and not overwhelm it with the glue, because we use starch, like the starch you use for clothing. We would use that as our glue. And so you would have these beautiful star or H formations. And so you would use different colors to outline the patterns that you've used, both the cord and the bamboo, to make the frame. And so you'd then put a see-through kind of what we call grease paper. You'd put that on, and then on top of that, you would put the pretty paper. And
Wow.
so you'd have these tremendous kites and different
Really
kinds
cool.
of frames. Yeah. So,
Wow.
the visual component, we used to also make our own scooters and our own trucks and cars, because we came from parents that were very rich in intellect and in ingenuity and so on, but we didn't have a lot of money.
I'd rather
And
have
so-
the ingenuity. You can
but
always
I'll,
make,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Patrick.
no, I'm just saying you can always make money with, I'd rather have the intellect and the ingenuity because you could use that to make money. I'd hate to be
Well,
without it.
I wanted to differentiate it, because a lot of people say we were poor. We weren't poor. We were poor. I want to be specific about what kind of poor there is, because they're often conflated, and it's a bad thing to conflate, because it makes you look as though you're destitute. We weren't destitute by any means. We had our own gardens and so on. But as far as having money to purchase some things, people were very stringent about what they bought. And my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, whose house I was born in and reared in, she was a very particular kind of consumer. She would look at things and show you what the issues were with purchasing this, how poorly constructed it was, and that she wasn't going to put her money into that, and that you should make your own stuff, which we
Oh,
did.
there you go. There you go.
And so we made also our own scooters, and I was mentioning trucks and cars. At that time, what I'm trying to get at is to show you the relationship of the visual component. Is at that time, oil came in cans, and these cans were, they would have Pegasus or other kinds of gods or emblems on them, and they were made very attractive in color. So we would go to a gas station, go to the oil, the bin where these cans were discarded, open up the cans, pour the oil out into something, because we were going to later use this oil. Then we would clean the cans, cut them open, clean them up, and then we'd cut them into these forms to make the hood and the bumpers and so on.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and then we also make your own antenna and all of that. And then we also made our own scooters. So we'd get ball bearings, the bigger ones that could become wheels, and we'd make scooters of a wooden frame, and we'd decorate them. we would use a bicycle tube, get a bicycle tube, cut our car or truck tubes. Sometimes they came in red, usually in black, and we would cut them into different shapes and frills, and we decorate our scooters that way. So you can see the visual element coming right along with the crafting element of something.
Not only are you learning how to make something, but you're bringing something from one dimension and bringing it into your dimension. And in a way, you're really learning better how things are made. Because
no doubt about learning more about construction. You would observe carpenters working. We were skilled enough to go around and pick up bent nails, straighten them.
Oh yeah.
Straighten bent nails, and then be able to drive them into a piece of wood without bending them again. So you were learning what's now called repurposing was just a natural part of life for us.
Right.
Yes. We learned also about metals, what was lead, what was copper, what was aluminum, what was brass, from observation. And because if you saw these things discarded, you could pick them up and you could sell them to somebody that purchased those things and make a little money. Bottles were also another way that you could earn a little money. You'd pick up bottles that were discarded, which was, yeah. So, the notion of it was one cycle. It really, recycle is a oxymoron in terms of
it's like a new word, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Now, how did this growing up crafting things out of items that people didn't see any value in, how did that lead to your career in music, or were you a visual artist first and then a musician?
I think I was, when I look back at it, didn't think of myself as a sculptor, visual artist. However, as time has evolved, I see now that all that time I was building sculptures and so on, not thinking of them in that manner necessarily, especially in Western culture. There's such a division. There's this notion that if you're a craftsperson, you're not an intellectual, which is really stupid, right? But there's that kind of separation that's made, between what's craft and what's fine art. And I would actually dare to say maybe craft, what's called craft, was probably the thing that led us to what's called fine art. Or maybe they're parallel, because we were always drawing and scratching things on the wall, but also when we made implements that were necessary for our survival, arrows, bows, spears, not only did they have to be made in terms of being aerodynamic and so on, but then people began to fashion them with real high focus on making them beautiful as well. So I don't see a separation at all. And what happened with me in terms of how those things dovetailed was I studied tailoring when I was in high school. I went to Dunbar High School after migrating to the U.S. I was a dropout, by the way, and I went back. Yeah, and then I went back to school and finished, what I needed to do. And what happened was, when I decided that I wanted to embark on learning music. I'm sorry, let me turn this thing off. I forgot it was in my pocket.
No problem. That even his alarm is musical. I need to ask him what that is behind there. I know there's got to be a musical instrument that he's sitting in front of. I need to ask him about that.
Oh yeah, it's remind me about the instrument. But
Okay.
what happened was I decided I wanted to become a musician. My parents were not that happy because I had already pursued tailoring and was pretty good at doing it, making a
Hmm.
living, making money while I was in high school.
Nice.
I was an apprentice, but also I began working for a percentage of what I earned. So
Hmm.
I was getting 60% of whatever I earned in somebody else's shop to do tailoring. And
Okay.
so, but when I decided I wanted to do music, I also, one of the reasons I had gotten into tailoring was I wanted to have independence. After doing a few part-time jobs and having a few not so kind people that I worked for, I was like, I don't see myself in a lifetime of working for people. And
Hmm.
so doing tailoring was was really good because you could see yourself owning a tailor shop
Hmm.
or working in a place for a percentage basis and you deciding how many hours you would work as opposed
Hmm.
to them telling you how many hours you would work. So I
There's real
found.
art in tailoring.
Mhm.
There's
Say that again.
real art. There's real art in tailoring.
Exactly. It's one of the highest forms of art that we have. So that's why this notion of painting or what's called sculpture. There's no sculpture maybe greater than tailors. Uh,
Hmm.
when you're really a fine tailor, I remember learning to press, and you had to learn how to press. You had to learn how to do certain kind of stitching and so on. But if you had a certain kind of deformity or a particular kind of accent in your body's structure, when you're a
Hmm.
fine tailor, all of those things are considered. So the garment is sculpted to the individual. Anyway, I when I decided to do music, I then also had to find a way to make a living, but not work full time for anyone. And
Hmm.
so I transferred that knowledge of sewing to making things out of leather. And because again, you're sewing and
Hmm.
you're sculpting to house an instrument or a bag or briefcase, or I used to actually make covers for boom boxes and things of that nature,
Cool.
wallets. Yeah. So
Hmm.
you transfer that knowledge, and it gives you the kind of autonomy, because I did art fairs in those days. And so you would, I'd play at night, and you would, on the weekends, I would do art fairs. You would stay up late. It
Hmm.
was, you'd make things, and then you'd go and you'd sell from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I had a part-time job,
Hmm.
tailoring. And I also at one time worked in Hyde Park at the animal clinic there as an
Oh,
assistant. Yeah,
in Harper Court.
To Dr. Kostesky. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
who was a really fine. He was from Poland. We got along splendidly. People thought he was a bit curt, but he was just a really kind of direct person that
Hmm.
had experienced World War II in Poland and had been shipped to Siberia. So he sometimes came across as being gruff, but it really wasn't gruff. It was just like no nonsense. Come on, let's get to it. That's
Yeah.
kind of the way he was. But he treated me very kindly, and I would help in the operating room. And the first time I remember, I almost fainted, and he recognized it and
I'm
said,
sure.
"You should leave, leave now. Go outside, get some air, and then you can come back." It took me a few times, and then I was able to deal with the cutting and the blood and so on.
Mhm. Boy, you've had a wide range of experiences.
I've enjoyed every part of it, and it's been crucial. So in doing, making things, then I got, because I was studying music, I got interested in playing flute.
Okay.
And when I got interested in playing flute, I didn't have a lot of money and so on. So I decided I'd make my own flute. And I started out in my mother's kitchen making flutes, what I knew of them at the time, and through experimenting, or as it's called, empirical research.
Okay. But here's the thing, though. So you were in Chicago by then. So how did you get the bamboo? Because I know there's bamboo in your home country in Jamaica.
Yeah,
But
well,
how'd you get it in Chicago?
the first piece of bamboo that I got, that I experimented with, my folks bought a rug and a piece of bamboo came in the center of it.
Smart.
And I
Okay.
took, instead of throwing it away, I decided I think I could attempt doing this.
Hmm.
I once went to a store to purchase a bamboo flute, or to more or less to look at it.
Hmm.
And the person wasn't exactly kind about it.
Hmm.
And so I told him swiftly that, hey, you don't have to show me. I'll make my own. It was kind
Wow.
of a it was kind of like, get away, I don't have to. And so that helped propel the notion, gave me the incentive. And so I began very, rudimentary, using coat hangers and picking up pieces of steel and
Hmm.
heating them. And that's how I began. And then as a result of making flutes, many of them, thousands of them, and having to demonstrate them at fairs, you get better at you get better at making the flutes. You get better at teaching people how to play,
Hmm.
and you get better at learning how to play yourself. And that grew into, after making really getting better at making flutes, then I started carving the outside of them,
Hmm.
and so that then, of course, dovetailed more into the fine art of making instruments.
Okay. Now, as far as the musical side of flute playing, how were you learning this? Were you listening to like Yusef Lateef or listening to Jose Fajardo or something? Or
Well, I had grown up listening to people like Buddy Collette, like Yusef Lateef, um, Herbie Mann. I'm trying to think of some other flute players that were very influential, and then of course later Eric Dolphy,
yeah.
James Moody was another
Mhm.
superb flautist. Many people don't
Rasan
recognize.
played flute, didn't he too? Rasan Roland Kirk, didn't he play
Oh,
flute?
Rashaan Roland-Kirk was also a,
Yeah.
a, a big influence. Jerome Richardson. Um,
Oh yeah.
some of the names aren't coming to me right away, but
Mhm.
those people impacted me in terms of listening to good flutes, and aspiring to make better instruments. But I went to the AACM School of Music. That was my first formal training in
Mhm.
playing musical instruments, and I started out with the saxophone. I always really wanted to play trumpet,
Oh,
but I tried to play, and I always felt like if I couldn't teach myself how to do something, that I didn't have the aptitude, which was a silly notion. But for whatever reason, I tried playing the trumpet, and I wasn't good. I went to see who was a trumpeter and somebody that I liked very much. He played in Sun Ra's band, and
mhm.
he was on, wasn't around all the time, but he gave me, I think, one lesson on the trumpet, and I didn't feel, like, it was going to be the instrument I love, but not necessarily the one I would be able to play.
Okay.
And so I bought a saxophone. It was actually Joseph Jarman's old Boucher saxophone that I bought.
Oh.
He had gotten himself a Selmer saxophone, and he was actually selling his instrument through a man named John Shanoy Jackson. John Jackson was was a trumpeter,
Mhm.
but he was also worked for the state. Um, was a social worker, a top rank one. But anyway, he was the one that was selling the saxophone, and
Mhm.
I couldn't I couldn't meet the price. But he went back to Joseph, and Joseph said, "Well, sell it to him for what he could
That's
pay
nice.
for it." And I think I paid $90 for it. I'm so sorry that I never kept that receipt,
Hmm.
because there was a receipt. John Jackson was a very businesslike uh,
Mhm.
man, great at management. Anyway, I bought this saxophone uh, in July of 1967, and
Okay.
I was able to, learn the fingerings and so on. And then I began taking some lessons from Joseph. And later in that fall of 67, I think October, um, AACM opened a school, and I began studying there, studying instrument technique and composition, musical theory. Right away, when you go to AACM school, composition is as vital as learning uh, how to play an instrument. So I began composing right away.
Okay.
And,
How did you feel about composing? Because a lot of people start out playing other people's music, the standards.
Well, we learned some standards,
Hmm.
but emphasis was for you to learn how to be a composer,
Mm.
and it was a natural aspect of going to AACM school. Now you
Nice.
weren't compelled to take composition, but I was definitely interested in
Hmm.
composition right away, and we actually formed. There were two there were several other people that went to the school, but there were twin brothers, Michael and Philip,
Mm.
Cosmic and Musra. Their name was Cooper, and they changed it to Michael Cosmic and Philip Musra. The Cooper twins, they were known as. And we
Mm.
formed a group, and we had bass and drums, but we didn't have any car. So the way we got around was on the train,
Mm.
and the bass player and the drummer were a bit reluctant to carry their stuff up and down, even though we would assist them doing it. So we
Mm.
wound up forming a trio of three saxophones. And
Wow.
we played coffee shops and things like that. And
Mm.
we would play the percussion instruments. We played tambourine and rhythm kind of things,
Mm.
claves, shakers as the rhythmic instruments. And we did coffee shops and fashion shows and different things without the accompaniment, which was typical bass and drum and
Mm.
piano. We later did have a pianist and we had a vocalist, but the
That's pretty
primary,
remarkable, though.
yes. Well, the we were so driven with the idea that we wanted to learn how to play that nothing was too far fetched to do, and we were also in the company in terms of the people we were studying with: Muhal Richard Abrams, Joseph Jarman, Roscoe
Mm.
Mitchell. Um, we weren't studying with Lester Bowie, but he was, we were watching these players: Leroy Jenkins, John Stubblefield, um, Alvin Fielder, Fred Anderson, and so on, Amina Claudine Myers. We were
Mm.
watching these Caliparusha, Maurice McIntyre, we were observing them, and they were doing solos and duets and so on. So nothing was, no instrumentation was far-fetched or even something that you considered strange to us. It was, hey, if you play music and you have an instrument, you can make it work.
Nice. Was
So
Phil
that was,
Corinne ever in there with you all? Because I don't. I think he gets a lot of credit for introducing Maurice White from Earth, Wind and Fire to the kalimba. But I was
mhm.
wondering, I know he inspired Earth, Wind and Fire and the Pharaohs, but was he ever in there
He
with you
was
all?
one of he was one of the
AC? Seems like
he
he
was
was.
one of he was one of the founders of the AACM. There
Oh,
were
that's
there
true.
were
Okay.
four founders: Muhal Richard Abrams,
I know them.
um, 𝗦𝗬𝗪𝗂𝗧𝗘𝗥,
Okay.
um, Steve McCall, Stephen McCall the fourth,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Jody Christian,
Oh, okay.
and they were the four founders of the organization. But Phil Coran eventually um, left AACM and formulated uh, his own organization. And
Okay.
so he had certain people that studied or was under his umbrella, so to speak. But
Okay.
we
Okay.
were
That's good
still,
to know because I didn't know that. So thank you.
yes, yeah. And we still kept in touch with Phil Coran. We still had him come in and do lectures. We still respected the fact that he was a founder, and
Oh yeah.
people have different ideas about things, and
Mhm.
many people were part of the ACM during the its inception that later went off to do other things or didn't necessarily like the direction, because some people felt it was that we should be doing standards and so on, and
Mhm.
other people, the emphasis was about original music, and so
Mhm.
that those were in some way divergent thinking, and some people didn't decided that they didn't want to stay with AACM, but later many of them came to recognize the importance of the AACM's philosophy
Mhm.
about original music and people
Yeah.
writing compositions. Yes.
That's great because there's enough room in the world of jazz for everyone.
Well, we even distanced ourselves from the term jazz.
Yeah, I
And
know.
if you even ask some of the people that are uh, named as jazz musicians, many of them really did not like the term because of its limiting aspects. It's the
I can understand.
political.
Yeah,
Hmm?
I can
Yeah.
understand that.
I mean, Duke Ellington, for example, wrote all kinds of music,
Hmm.
and as you may have known, was even not given the Pulitzer, and now there's talk about, giving him one posthumously. Uh, I'm I'm like,
Yeah,
why bother? Why I wouldn't take it, but
it's a little late.
it's too late. And what would be the purpose of it? It would actually be a feather in Pulitzer's hat more than in Duke. Duke doesn't care where he is right now. And it's just, it's like me asking you for a glass of water and you throw it on the floor and then I scoop it up. that's how I,
Yeah.
that's my
Mhm. Mhm.
analogy. That's my analogy. It's yeah, I just wouldn't, I feel like he was deprived when people that weren't even near his ability in terms of
Mhm.
composition were given the Pulitzer, and we know it was based on bigotry and racism, uh,
Mhm.
and so that's part of the reason. When you there's a book by Louis Armstrong called "Swing That Music," and I would entreat your listeners to look at that book and see what he calls his music, and Yusef Lateef has a whole nother notion about what his music should be called. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, there are differences about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, Phil Koran made an important contribution in Chicago, as did the other founders of AACM.
Mhm.
Formidable composers and musicians all were. Yeah.
Wonderful. And they're still at it. It still exists, which is
Well,
wonderful.
none of the founders, well, AACM still exists, but
Yeah.
uh, but the founders of AACM have all departed for
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
destinations. Yes,
Yeah. But the music goes on.
the music goes on, the legacy goes on, the notion of passing the information and the knowledge on to others, and it's we're respecting all of the facets of Black music and
Hmm.
other music, but I'm speaking particularly of music that's come out of our lineage, because
Hmm.
it's also been so, um, it's been utilized and yet deprived,
Yeah.
um, not recognized. But I would dare say that no music on the planet has had more global resonance and effect than music coming from the Black experience, the diaspora,
Hmm.
including Africa, of course.
Hmm.
Just look at all the what's going on around the world and see whose music has influenced it, whose music has impacted. That's not to say that other cultures have not made their contribution. I'm not.
And they have for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're
I'm
right.
not saying that. And
Mm-hmm.
myself, I've been impacted by many cultures. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but my
When I spoke to you on the phone over the phone yesterday,
Yeah,
you said you just this year
yes,
you've been to Norway,
yes,
South Korea, and where else? Panama or somewhere.
Vancouver and to Glasgow, Scotland. I went to Norway to do. There was an exhibition there, and um, let's say serendipitously, many
Mhm.
of the people this exhibition, in fact, was work made about various artists, including Sun Ra, Alvin Curran, who is a electronic um, experimental artist who now lives in Rome, has lived there for many years. He had worked there. Roscoe Mitchell,
Mhm.
who from the Art Ensemble of Chicago, is also a painter.
Mhm.
Um, um, they were the exhibition was primarily about musicians that were Colleen Smith had some work there. Um, she's a visual artist, but much of her work also focuses on music. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if Colleen is a musician. I don't know that, but she's a formidable visual artist and thinker.
Mhm.
And there were many others there whose work, including mine, was both. I had a painting and three um, instruments that are sonic sculptures. And in fact, I'll show you one
Please
that
do.
I'll show you one. This one is called the George Floyd Bunch Staff, and
Oh,
it's an instrument that I had been working on for some time, and I had put it aside. Sometimes it takes years to do something, and including gatherings one philosophy.
yeah.
People often think that we just, that everything comes out all at once, but it's like describing your work. You get better at it the more you do it and the longer that you do it. And you learn also from observing and listening to other artists about
Mhm.
work, and be it visual, be it movement, whatever form it takes. Now, I'm going to see if I can position myself so you can see this
Okay.
instrument. And I'll talk with you about the instrument in the background.
What on earth?
So I'm going to move it back a bit more,
Wow.
move this up and down. So this is a series of bunt pans, and bunt pans, of course, are baking pans.
Huh.
Some of them are made from. I'm trying to reach a couple of mallets.
Okay.
Some of them are made from tin. This one is the older form. It's
Mm-hmm.
made of tin.
It's real metal. Yeah.
Yes, and it's stainless steel coated. It's very, even though it's made of tin, it's very rigid, and because it has these indentations and so on, it's made it
Mm-hmm.
even stronger. And then this
Nice.
this one is a casted one made of aluminum.
Ooh. Wow. Wow.
And depending on the kind of mallet that you use,
Whoa.
then there's another aspect to it.
Oh. Huh.
So this instrument, evolved over time, and after this is using a rubber ball, which I,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
fastened onto a nice piece of plastic, and so you can see the hardness of the mallet gives you a different timbral. And of course, you have,
Mm.
that's using the stick part. So you get a whole nother kind of sound thing. And then you can do things like this with.
Yeah.
I played another instrument just then.
You know what I like best about that?
Yeah.
You can't tell anybody how exactly to play it.
Yes.
It's like people have to explore that one.
Yeah, well, you can develop different techniques to playing it, and there are different kinds of some balls that are rubber, they will grip, and you can rub them and get a whole nother I'm rubbing it rather than striking it.
Okay.
And so you have a lot of variables in terms of the kinds of sound you can get from it. Now, bunt is BUNDT for the pans.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion about this being called the George Floyd bunt staff is bunt in terms of baseball, BUNT. And if you know what bunting is the batter makes a sacrifice
Mm.
to get
Yeah,
the other players home, right?
exactly. Right.
And so,
He knows he's going to be thrown out, but it
yes,
allows the other player to make an advance.
exactly.
Yeah.
So now one of my sisters said to me, she doesn't know if I could really appropriately apply that to George Floyd, but we don't know what was on George Floyd's mind and whether it was inadvertent or deliberate. The impact is the same in terms of what it did to mobilize the world and the world looking at what occurred.
I totally agree with
With
you because there had been several deaths, but his particular death, I think, because of the, I think because it was so casual. You know, we're accustomed to seeing people getting killed in the passion of the fight or the murder. George Floyd's death was so remarkably casual. And I think that's what got to people. I think that's what finally woke them up when they saw how casual and how uncaring the murder was. It was just so almost otherworldly how unbothered the officer was and how
the
casual he was. Yeah.
length of time, which speaks to what you're saying. The length of time, 10 minutes, 9 minutes, 29 seconds, let's say 10 minutes, because probably started before the document was being made.
Yeah.
Thanks to the young lady whose name is, what's her name? We'll have to remember her name before we
You're
go
right.
off
Yeah.
the air. I've promised myself that I would not forget it, but at the moment I'm not thinking of it. But in any event, the documentation, I think it was the confluence of things. The with the pandemic, people were able to pay attention in a different way because people didn't have to go to work the next day like the normal situation. We've seen many brutal killings. The Rodney King one wasn't a murder, but it was as close to a murder in a sense as one could get, and that would have to have impacted him for the rest of his life. That beating was so brutal.
Yeah.
And he was tased, and they were beating him when he was down on the ground. It was one of the most wretched kind of things. And to think that they got off until there was uprising about it. Had there been nothing done in terms of the people rebelling, nothing would have come of that case. And the same with George Floyd. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's a reality in terms of no attention is paid here unless it impacts money. But what I want to really get to is the fact that people were really able to focus on not just the brutality and the brazenness of the crime, but people had time.
I didn't think of it that way. Yeah.
Yes, people had time, because if it was a normal time, people would have had to go to work, and even in their their wrath and their disgust,
Mm-hmm.
they would still have to pay attention to going to the plantation the next day. And so here, people were home,
Mm-hmm.
people were away from school, people were, it was just an amazing response. And because of all the forms of media that we now have, as opposed to Rodney King's time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people, it was broadcast simultaneously on a
Yeah.
global level,
Mm-hmm.
because
Right. Right. It was
it was,
global. It was.
and people, George Floyd, as I say in one of my pieces, was not an anomaly. We have Breonna Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
Amadou Diallo. Um, we can go on and on and on uh, about the various people that have been killed. But
Mm-hmm.
that at that particular time and space,
Mm-hmm.
people were able to focus on it, and they rallied. Here, George Floyd. I live in Minneapolis, and it's just about 5 or 7 blocks from my house where he was murdered. And
Wow.
so we felt the repercussions of it. We're still feeling the repercussions of it because
Mm.
many businesses were destroyed, and there were a lot of people that took advantage of that
Mm-hmm.
moment, both positively and those that did it in terms of negatively.
Oh, sure. We had that too.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the timing and everything of it. Anyway, the bunch staff is a salute to George Floyd and what he how he impacted the world, and how it's um it's inspired a lot of very powerful movements and thoughts and forward motion in a
Mhm.
sense. I think the fact that we had the trial that we've had here, I think
Mhm.
without the uprising, we would not have had the verdict that we had.
Definitely not, because police are always found to that it was just part of their duties, as it were. You
Yeah,
know,
it's like,
along the lines
oh,
of
this,
their every
yes, it's
normal
always
work.
seen as like being necessary. It was,
Yeah.
they applied the force because it was called for or something like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to show you one of my really. This is one of my flutes,
Beautiful. It's
and
huge.
this is the idea. It's about 4 feet long. It's two flutes in one. There's
Wow. So when
one
it's
here.
that big, is it like a bass or something, or baritone, or ooh?
went from
Beautiful.
making smaller flutes to making flutes of this kind and carving them elaborately. I'll get
Mhm.
one of the smaller ones. I actually have a beautiful bone flute that I recently made, but I left it downstairs.
Oh,
But here's a
what's this
small,
one?
this is a smaller
Those
bamboo.
designs are burned in, right?
Yes.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yes.
Now,
Go ahead.
are you going to tell us what's behind you?
Yes.
It's
It's called the People's Idiophone.
called who? It's called who?
The People's Idiophone. And
Beautiful.
an idiophone is an instrument that has its own resonator, so to speak.
Oh,
And these are made from dishes, serving trays, hubcaps, pot covers, uh, other kinds of found metal material. I'll
mhm.
give you a little sample of the sound.
Yeah.
And this was actually designed and was played. This particular instrument was in front of a place called the Pillsbury House here in Minnesota for about a year.
Oh. Ooh. I like that. Nice. I like that ceramic sound.
Yes. So these are made from, and here's a,
Ooh. What's that?
this is just an aluminum. Some people use it for, storing things in there, maybe a fruit bowl or to cook
Wow.
in.
It's like a meditation thing.
It's very much like a singing bowl, and
Yeah.
you can actually do it. I don't see the right mallet for it. You can rub it just like you do a singing bowl.
Oh, yeah. Around the rim. Yeah. Nice.
The whole idea is, we can build a lot of the items that we see And if we just use a little ingenuity, we can come up with some very interesting things. I'm going to show you another instrument. This one is called plowshares. And it's actually made from, I think these are 40mm gun shells.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to play it for you. I don't know if you can really see it so well. Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
These are ping pong.
That's a ping pong paddle.
Ping pong paddles. I've covered one side with leather and the other side with rubber.
Oh, yeah.
And so they give you different textures. Then you can use the size.
Nice.
And then you can also bow this instrument.
Ooh. Ooh. Nice.
And I have two more I want to show you. Oh, wow. Dropped on that. Don't want to step on that. Let's see. Let's get this here. This is the.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah. So this is a crest. And as you can see, it's turned into a beautiful bell tree, tied. There are bells along the center, which are strung on a metal rod and spaced by brass sleeves. And then these are bells tied on with really strong rope. And some at the bottom are even screwed on with eyelet screws.
Nice. That sounds good.
So you can play it as a stamping stick or you can rattle it. Then you can have what's called a crutch drum.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's
so what is that?
This is goat skin.
Okay.
And it's tied on.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, show us that.
Yeah, so it's laced on there.
Nice.
And because of the humidity right now, it's a little duller than it normally would be, but it's still a beautiful sound. And of course, it's beautifully decorated with different symbols on it.
You're having so much fun.
Hey, look, there's nothing else to do. I'm going to show you. This one might also, it's a little low right now, but this is made from a bicycle wheel. And
what?
This is a drum. It's a little bit down because of the humidity. But I've cut the bicycle spokes, and you can see instead of cutting them really short, I've left them long enough that you can decorate the instrument while it's still functioning to hold the skin on.
That's clever.
So, I'm going to show you I'm just walking around, you know. Here's one more variation on the crutch, and then I'll show you a couple other items very quickly.
You have like a magical studio.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Here's, this is another form of the crutch.
Yeah.
These are, you know, those orange juice lids. You know,
Oh,
when
okay.
you take off the lids. So you have those, and then.
Ooh. Now, where'd you get those?
I collect bells. I have hundreds of them.
Whoa.
And I'm hoping that I'll be able to open a bell museum.
Nice.
I have a few thousand bells. They're downstairs, so you can't see everything. But I'm gonna give you before we're done. I'll show you just a couple other items.
Okay. Oh, this show can be as long as we need for it to be. Don't even worry about it.
Okay. Then
this is your show.
All right. Then one of the things that I've been doing is making tops.
You mean toy tops?
Spinning tops.
Ooh, spinning tops, yeah.
And you know, I might be able to spin a couple. I don't see the launching items, but these are tops made from different materials. This is wooden.
Nice.
It was a candle holder. I transformed it into a top.
That's pretty.
This is
whoa.
This is a LP. On the other side is a laser disc, and then there's a small 33.5. It looks almost like a 45, and then here there is a CD. So sometimes I have.
Oh, I love it, Douglas.
Yeah.
Do you know I make spinning tops out of CDs, and I put a marble. I glue a marble to it, and you spin it on the marble.
Oh, I got to see that.
Yeah, you spin it on the marble.
In the middle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you spin it. Uh-huh. Well, that is that's gigantic.
This is an unusual size. This is an unusual size.
That is huge.
This is a 16-inch Armed Forces, what do you say, long plane. They had a special turntable for this, and I guess this way they could have more information than on a typical disc.
Okay.
And then you have a LP, which is pink.
Okay.
And then you have, I don't think this is a 78, but it's around the size of a 78. Then you have a 45. Then you have the CD. And I even have one with yet a smaller disc. I don't know what
the mini disc.
The mini disc.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at this,
it's history.
Yes, it's a chronicle about the technologies.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful spin. I'll spin this one as best I can. It's not. I usually have a device, but I don't. Oh, I think I see one. And then this one is made from an M&M's container.
Wow.
And see, so I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna move the computer. I'm gonna spin one and have you see how it works.
I knew this was going to be fun. I didn't know it was going to be this fun. And fanciful.
This is I'm gonna put this down on the ground. Let's
Okay.
see.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Now this is a launching stick, and it's got a hole in it. I'm gonna put the string through it like I'm threading a needle through the eye. I pull it.
Okay.
I pull it through. I let that go, and then I'm gonna wrap this
Oh. Okay.
around here. What this does, you can spin it this way, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but to get more torque, you use the string, you can get a lot more torque
Okay.
that way. Now, what's been interesting about this is I've done a composition, few iterations of it using double Dutch, Tai Chi, yoga, poetry, a poet on roller skates, one walking around, and then musicians in a composition, and with
Wow.
videographers videotaping it and simultaneously running it back on different surfaces while the piece is going on. So here we go.
Yeah. Nice.
So this is on this is an old globe, which I collect the globes now,
Oh,
especially
sweet.
if I can find. I use any kind, but of course, the good find is if you can get a metal one, which this one is,
Oh.
because
Okay.
then it's it's got a little bit more weight to it,
Mm-hmm.
and the history of it, and because they stopped making them. They make them out of cardboard now most of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm
but
used to them being made out of like a hard, thin wood.
oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah.
But I've been using that, and then I have from wheels. This is a wheel,
Oh, nice.
and it's very solid
Mhm.
and very durable. This one is made of bamboo, and it
Ball
makes
bearings would be nice. Ooh, look at that.
yeah, and it makes a nice sound because it makes a sound like that when it's spinning because
Cool.
it has that slit,
Mhm.
and here's the globe.
Ooh, nice. When you're doing this, are you playing or inventing?
I'm doing both. I mean, I come up and just spin these sometimes just as a meditation, as a look. Adults should be playing too. My
I
work, my
know.
work is play. My work is play, and my play is
Nice.
work. And when children play, they're learning.
Mhm.
Right? We do certain things when we're children that as we grow up we stop doing. But some as a result, um, people say they're bored. I could never say that to my grandmother, or
Oh,
else
we weren't allowed to say that.
yeah, same thing here. You
I'll
had
give you I'll give you something to work on if
ah
you do.
So when people say that to you, you realize they grew up in an atmosphere where they could get away with saying that. We couldn't get away with saying that.
No way. Go put to
So
work.
it was your own fault if you were bored.
Hmm.
So and I have some smaller ones, but I gave away the last. I have some that are made from thread spools, but I
Nice.
give those away because they're easier for kids
Hmm.
to manage, and
Hmm.
they're not as when you spin these, you have to be careful where you're doing it, or else you can collide into something delicate. But I have the little ones made of from thread spools, this thread
Mm-hmm.
that you use to sew with. We
Mm-hmm.
cut it in two, make it smooth, and then put a dowel rod in the middle of it, and you can spin it very easily with your fingers, which is good
Mm-hmm.
for, manual dexterity. The kids
Mm-hmm.
learn how to make something of their own. They're not buying everything that they utilize. And it
Mm-hmm.
goes into, to me, it transfers to us cooking, people cooking for their children rather than
Mm-hmm.
everything they eat is pre-made or we
Yeah.
we had we ate most of our foods that we ate were made from what you would say from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning, and as a
Mm-hmm.
result, I think we are healthier. Um, you learn how to have a little garden of your own. If it's nothing
Mm-hmm.
but growing some of the herbs that you use to cook with, but we
Mm-hmm.
had growing up, we had several fruit trees. We had about 7 mango trees. We had
Ooh, I love
papaya
mango.
trees,
Ooh.
lime trees. We had
Mm-hmm.
ackee trees.
You had
We
who?
had flower gardens. We raised our own chickens. It was
Wow.
just a whole ecosystem of living.
That's how
And
my mom
then
grew
we
up.
went, yeah. Then you
Mm-hmm.
go to the butcher shop, and most of the meat we ate never saw ice. It was it was cooked. We went to a butcher shop on Saturday morning, and
Mm-hmm.
they would get things and they would season it up. Most people didn't have a refrigerator, so you ate fresh food every day, and
Wow.
we didn't realize how luxurious that was
It's
until
considered gourmet now.
yeah. Well, you look at it and you think, oh, I wish I had a refrigerator. And when you grow up and you realize, like, wow, we were eating food that was never on ice. This
Wow.
is a this is a top made from a plunger.
Oh.
The plunger was never used. And this is an unusual plunger too. If you look at it, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see it's very different in its construction
Yeah.
from what you
It's got an
typically.
extra. Yeah. I've
Yeah,
seen
but
it.
I saw it. Those when you go to a place and they have like a bin of things that they can't sell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not an easy plunger to use, so it was perfect for me to turn it into a top. But what I wanted to tell you about playing with tops, what it's inspired for me was um, using it to teach physics.
Oh.
And what I've been doing is I've been going into schools uh, with tops, and then I take a physicist with me after
Mm-hmm.
we get tops made and everything, and then we look at the behavior of tops,
Mm-hmm.
the physical behavior of tops, the physics of tops,
Mm-hmm.
what happens with a top, why about velocity, torque, the importance of torque, what torque is, making something able to spin, and then you're dealing with velocity, then you're dealing with friction, then you're dealing with when it sits in one spot, you're dealing with inertia, then you're dealing with orbit or precession. Uh, there are all these. I have about 40 different Doppler effect because it makes sound, and the sounds um, based on the speed, it makes certain kind of sound, and as it slows down, you're getting the kind of thing that happens with Doppler effect. And
Right.
so here's something that someone would look at and say, "Oh, how is a grown person playing with this?" It has all these possibilities in it. It's for
Mm-hmm.
you to see those possibilities. So in
On scientific concepts.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you can then look at the behavior of heavenly bodies, as we call them,
Mm.
and or planetary behavior or asteroids and so on. You can look at those behaviors because many of them it involves spinning
Mm-hmm.
and then your gravity and all those things. You can then use a what seems to be just a toy, and most things that we use are simple. It's the stacking of ideas and concepts that makes it become more complex.
It
Uh,
seems that a child who grows up manipulating the world the way you have, in terms of making things and actually instead of buying them, it seems that the bigger concepts of science would be much more easily grasped. The way I look at it.
I think so too, and I think if we found more practical ways of transmitting this information to students,
Mm-hmm.
basketball, would, since they love basketball so, that
Mm-hmm.
would be a great conduit to teach physics and to
Oh, for
talk about
sure.
football. Since they're already into those games, use
Mm-hmm.
the game as a way to show how you build an equation. That's exactly what uh, James Doyle, who goes with me to the schools, um, we we talk about this. And then in addition, here's another concept that you can use to make musical composition using the tops. You put on the ground or on the floor or on the mat that you're using to spin
Mm-hmm.
the tops, you write, let's say from 1 to 16. So you're dealing with intervals.
Mm-hmm.
Then you put the 7 letters of the alphabet, musical alphabet,
Mm-hmm.
and you put them in different spots. You spin. When the top spins, let's say the top stops at A,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, okay. Then somebody else spins and their top stops on a 7. And
Mm-hmm.
now you have A7. And as you know, if you know music or something about music theory, then you know you can have it could be a minor 7th, it could be a A major 7th, it could be
Mm-hmm.
a dominant 7th, it could be a major, minor, diminished, augmented. So right away, with 2 spins,
Mm-hmm.
you've generated
You
this
can go
much.
in different directions.
Yes, all these different directions, and then when you spell out what those, whether it's A, C sharp, E, G sharp, or A, C natural, E natural, G natural, or
Mm-hmm.
A, C, E, G sharp, so on.
Mm-hmm.
You have these different kinds of A chords that you can build, either a triad or a 7 chord or a
Or even
third.
a melody.
So right away
Mm-hmm.
you're now generating both harmony and melodic possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can transfer that information to the blackboard using musical language, or you could spell out the letters for people that might not necessarily read lines and spaces. They could still understand,
Sure.
like some players, guitar players, they know the notes and so on. They might not read lines and spaces, but they know what a G chord is or a G
Yeah.
major
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And so point is here is a top that you think of as child's play, that you just spin the top, and how many times are you going to spin it? I don't have the capability of spinning the top in some fashions that I'd like to show you, but
Mm-hmm.
there are different ways that you can get the top to behave depending on how you spin it. I can spin them upside.
Especially if it's like a dreidel with different
Yes.
sides.
Yes, and so, and of course with these tops I'm showing you, you can use your palm, you can use
Mm-hmm.
your fingers, or you can use a string. You
Mm-hmm.
can, some of the tops I have they're so big and heavy, it needs 3 people to propel it. You
Mhm.
know, you have somebody holding a piece of wood on both sides of the stick, and then you have somebody, maybe 2 people pulling it, because you need that much torque to
Mhm.
make it stand up because it's so heavy.
Wow.
So it's all of these possibilities, all of these possibilities. What seems like, oh, it's just a toy. Well, it is a toy, but it's a toy becomes a gyroscope.
Ooh,
A
yeah.
top,
I used to love
a
those.
gyroscope is pretty much a top.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
had one when I was a kid. Yeah, I love those. Before we go,
Yes.
I do want to point out that next Sunday is going to be a very special day for people in Chicago who love music, because you are going to be a part of this Sonic Paradise flute
Yes.
flight with 𝗦𝗬𝗪𝗂𝗧𝗘𝗥 and
Yeah.
Robert Dick. It's going to
Yes.
be at the Elastic Arts on
Elastic
Diversity.
art.
hmm
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
$15 at the door.
We're going to play at Elastic Arts, and it's a really fantastic place that all sorts of events happen. This will be, I've played with Robert Dick many times. He's a
Mhm.
fantastic flutist. Not only is he a fantastic flutist, he's done all kinds of extensions and development on the typical flute. You can do your own research by looking up Robert Dick,
I will.
the flautist,
Okay.
and he's a theorist. On top of it, he's written several books about the flute. He has a book about multiphonics and about extended techniques and so on. And then Hefty is someone I've not had the privilege of meeting yet, but he's a friend of Robert Dick's. And this is how musicians connect,
Mhm.
through each other. And so we're all um, practitioners or flute players. And
Mhm.
I'll be playing some additional instruments, but we'll be focusing on various kinds of flutes. And
Okay.
so we're looking forward to you coming out next week. What's that, Saturday?
It's going to be next
Sunday.
Sunday,
Yeah,
uh,
Sunday.
8 o'clock Chicago time at
Central Standard Time.
Elastic Arts, 3429 West Diversey, number 208. $15 at the door in Chicago. Wish I could come, but it's a little far away from me.
Come on out. Those of you that can, send your offerings.
I know
No,
they're going to love. I mean, wow, 3 great musicians.
we're very excited about doing this, and as you can imagine, um, just the we have great enthusiasm for what we do, and I'm so looking forward to this, and to try new things, uh, because we'll be playing with each other as a trio for the first time.
Nice.
So it's
That should
very
be
exciting.
wild. That means nothing's written down.
Nothing will be written down except what we know. And the
Wow.
thing is, that it's conversation.
Okay.
When we get ready to, like we're having this interview,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't. I've written a little bit of something in the chat, but primarily we're going to go from the vocabulary that we have, and
Mm-hmm.
new things will develop from that conversation, as it does with any conversation. And you're impacted and influenced by what the other people bring to the conversation. And we've been studying music. Everyone has been studying music in this particular group for
Mm-hmm.
over 50 years. So we bring that experience to it. And improvisation is is high art. It
Mm-hmm.
has its immediacy, and then it has its part that where you've you've looked at your instrument over many decades of exploration and study and application and learning from others and so on. So we come with knowledge, but we also come as a vacant canvas.
Nice. May I ask, if you don't mind, how many different flutes will you be taking for this concert?
I will have.
Or do you decide on that day, depending on the vibe?
I will carry. Sometimes it's like the doctor's bag. You carry the doctor's bag, but you don't do surgery just because you got your scalpel. you know.
Beautiful. And with that, I just want to thank you so much, Douglas, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. It was
really enjoyed having you on.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to the next time.
All righty. So I'm going to say good night for now, but stay there, Douglas. I'm going to end the show. But I did have a question to ask you off camera. So, so thank you so much, everybody, for watching this show. I really hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I did. Just visiting with Douglas R Ewart. It is so fun. I look forward to meeting with you again, Douglas. And say hello to Janice for me. And with that, I'm going to end the show. And again, for those of you who are in Chicago or in the area and are lucky enough to go to next Sunday's concert, good on you. Sorry I can't be there. But with that, have a beautiful day. And I'll see you all later.
Walk good. Walk good.
Absolutely. Here we go.